Zoom. You guys are zooming in. The numbers go up very fast. And we're just getting our Facebook Live going. It looks like it may be going now. Jamie, are we good? Are we all set?
So
great. Well, welcome everybody on Zoom and on Facebook Live for another in our final session of our 6 weeks overview of the Resonance Science Academy's Unified Science Program. Welcome back. If this is your another repeat session for you guys, and if this is your first time here, we welcome you and enjoy what we have to say if you're not familiar with the material yet, but we'll talk a bit about the course that this is related to as well, and what you can do to remain involved with this, with the program and with these kinds of sessions with Nassim going forward. So again, my name is Marshall Lefferts, and I'm a member of the faculty of the Resonance Academy and a member of the board of directors of the foundation, and also the author of the book Cosmometry, Exploring the Holofractal Nature of the Cosmos, which goes very much into Nassim's theory. And as usual, I'm here with Nassim Haramein, who is RSF's founder and director of research. And then today we have, again with us, William Brown, who is our resident biophysicist and also contributed to the writing of Module 6 in the course, which is what we're going to be discussing today. And we also have a wonderful surprise guest, the surprise to me anyway, which is Andrea Melone, who works with Nassim at ARK Crystal and also has contributed to updating some of the material in this section of the course, the section on the ARK Crystal, which is in Module 6. And that's a very rich topic in this particular module. We'll get to that in a moment, but I wanted to say that this is the last of our 6-week series of live stream sessions offered as an introduction to our online course, which is called Exploring Unified Science. And if you're not familiar with that course yet, you can go to resonancescience.org and sign up for the course for free there. Again, it's called Exploring Unified Science. And if you've been with us through these 6 weeks and you're enjoying these Q&A sessions with Nassim and would like to continue with them, you can do so by becoming a member at the same resonancescience.org website for as little as $5 a month. And starting in June, starting next month, we will have monthly Live with Nassim Q&A sessions every first Wednesday of the month at 12 p.m. Pacific time, as well as monthly Q&A sessions with Resonance Academy faculty, which includes myself and William Brown, Jamie Janover, who's here as well today with us, Adam Apollo, Robert Grant, and others, which is going to be happening every third Wednesday of the month. And you can become a member by going to the store at resonancescience.org. And there's one of the options in the store is to become a contributing member. And $5 a month is the lowest level, so it's really super easy to get engaged with that option. And as well, we have higher amounts because some people wanted to be able to pay more and contribute more in donations to support the work we're doing at RSF. And our wonderful small team, Penny and David and Jamie, and maybe there's someone else I'm leaving out, who are working behind the scenes to bring all this. Oh, Angel.
Angelina.
Yeah, Angelina. I knew there was somebody quite.
Shout out to Angel.
Yeah, absolutely. So really fantastic core team that's making all this available now. Thank you guys so much for all that. So today we're going to be exploring Module 6 of the program, which is called Implications and Applications. And this is the final module. And again, if you've been going through the program, you have a sense of what the rest of the modules are about. We covered the worldview of unified science, unified physics, we covered thinking differently, what it takes to really engage in having a new paradigm of understanding in science and in the world, against some of the odds to really make such a shift, because there's a lot of resistance in terms of the main narrative that's at play being confronted by something that's in some ways radically new, but really fundamentally is actually pretty congruent with much of what's been obviously brought to theory in science, but extends it in ways that are really necessary to have a holistic model. And then we went through module 3, which is the modern physics and understanding kind of the core aspects of the theory of physics that then are foundational to understanding the unified physics model, which is discussed in module 4. And then last week we went through the ancient origins of unified physics and how this ties back into the deep history of our world here, and the clues that are in architecture and in symbology, in ancient texts that really point to this knowledge that the unified physics really points to having been known for a long time and having had a significant role in even the creation of some of the ancient artifacts, like, for example, the pyramids and many structures around the world, and temples, and even such technologies as are proposed in that module as the Ark of the Covenant. And this final module then is about the implications and applications of unified science and unified physics, and explores a number of topics. And I can bring that up on screen if we'd like to go through those real quick. But Nassim, why don't you just say a quick hello, and I'll pull that up when you're done with that, and we can look at the topics in this.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be on again and to connect with everybody. It's so good to see all the excitement and all the participation. And I've been looking at the forum a little bit. I still haven't had time to get in there and answer. And we are actually thinking about doing sessions where, you know, on the forum where I would come in with all of the members of the research team, and we could answer all, you know, like questions specifically during that period. And that would be fun. So we're working on that so that it kind of, you know, straps me down to like doing it, because, you know, I'm looking at the forum in here and there, and I'm enjoying the conversation and all this. I just hadn't had time to get in there. And it's always a little more difficult for me to write in these type of like forum and blogs and all this, because I write slow, I type slow, because you know, I have a dyslexic thing going, and so and it's my second language. But I look forward to be part of the more of the discussion and answering questions there. But it's great to see all the people taking the course, and I'm excited about this module because you know, we've made it over the hump. You know, here is the place where I call it the cherry on the sundae. We get to like see what our world could look like if we applied these principles of unification, our, you know, new worldviews, and the unification of science, and the implications for society are incredible, and the applications for society are incredible. So I'm looking forward to discussing that today.
Yeah, this is really exciting to get to this level of understanding, because this is where it becomes completely relevant to our times.
Right.
And it's so important. So I'm going to
especially at this time.
Especially at this time.
Yeah.
It's quite critical now to the choices we make going forward are going to determine, you know, for generations to come what this world will be like. And this knowledge is really key to informing those choices.
Right.
Yeah. So here's just a quick review of what's in Module 6 for those who are not yet familiar with it and maybe joining us today. Just at a very high level, and then we can go into these much more in depth. So the first section is called Energy Generation and Gravity Control. Well, right there, you've got two very fundamental aspects of need in the world: to generate energy and to have control of gravity, which both of those are, really fundamental issues because of the technologies we use now, both to generate energy and to move through space, especially with aerospace technology, are really quite, in many ways, quite destructive and dangerous and polluting and all that.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, like, people would probably wonder what we mean by gravity control. Well, just quickly, I just want to say, some people use the term anti-gravity because they think of something that is countering gravity, but anti-gravity is like saying that darkness is anti-light, right? So I don't, it's more that you can control gravity. So for instance, we built our whole society that we have today because we learned to control electromagnetic field and make them do things for us that are useful. For instance, to like make your cell phone work, to generate all kinds of electric fields that we use in our houses, that we use in many different ways, to ignite gasoline in our engines and all this stuff. And so basically we've learned to use or to control the electromagnetic forces. And the next step for humanity along the lines of learning to alter or utilize the natural forces of creation, the next step in our evolution is to learn to control and organize the gravitational forces in certain ways that allows us to counter the gravitational force of the earth, which keeps us on the surface of the earth. So it's not anti-gravity because it's not anti the earth gravity. It's just a source of gravity that is different than the earth, right? That comes from a different source than the earth. Well, actually, it comes from the same source of the earth, but it's controlled differently, so that it produces repulsion instead of attraction, meaning it's moving you away from the earth. But so you could think of it as like making a point of high gravitational force, so if I made a point of high gravitational force above your head that was stronger than the gravity of the earth in your local area, you would start levitating towards that point, right? So imagine a ship that produces a point of gravitational force above it, right? Or in the direction in which it wants to go, that is stronger, right? That is attracting the vessel towards it, whether it's stronger than the earth, or it might be stronger than the gravitational forces of the sun, for instance, and allow you to escape the solar gravitational force as well, and escape our solar system, or and so basically it's learning exactly what gravity is and how to control it so that we can get acceleration in in a direction of our choice, right? Instead of an acceleration towards the center of the earth.
Right. And our current technology for air transport is based on a very kind of crude, you could say, thrust model that has serious potential for complications and accidents and
Right.
danger, and just takeoff and landing themselves are dicey prospects when you're working with
Right.
those kinds of principles.
Right.
And fortunately, the success rate is very high. But
Yeah,
nonetheless,
which is remarkable.
yeah. But what we're talking about here is with gravity control is an ability to eliminate those kinds of dynamics and have a much more fine, and I would say probably nuanced relationship with the ability
Yeah.
to move through space.
Well, definitely, yeah, and as well, I would say an ability to move through space at much faster accelerations
as well,
and much larger distances, because you're not carrying fuel, you're just producing an effect in space, which costs energy to do. Except that the energy that's in the space itself is what you're manipulating. And we know that the energy in the space is there.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's the one of the early sections in this module is I think it's called it's called quantum vacuum engineering.
Right.
And really, both in terms of the generating of energy and the control of gravity, we're talking about the same thing here.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're talking about the same thing in two different applications.
Yeah.
You know, just like, you know, you can use electromagnetic fields to do things like, you know, carry information for your cell phone, or you can use electromagnetic fields to, you know, power something or make a microwave oven, or right. So there's different, you know, applications. Not that I recommend microwave ovens, but there's two different applications to basically the objection that gravity could be controlled is because in current equations, the energy required to produce a gravitational field are huge, right? It's immense, and the thought that you could produce that much energy locally, you know, would require something that is not feasible at all. You know, especially not in a spaceship, right? I mean, the device would have to be huge. You know, it would be like, it would be all the nuclear power plants on the planet just to relieve a little gravity off a teaspoon, right? So it just doesn't add up. And so in general, physicists think it's not possible. You know, the error that's made, and this is an error that you know, other physicists you know, eventually came to as well, like Sonny White at NASA and others, realized, wait a minute, though, the vacuum fluctuation in the structure of space are enormous. There's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of electromagnetic energy in the structure of space. We don't need to produce the power. We just need to organize it in certain ways that, you know, with a little bit of energy, you can organize it in certain ways that it will produce a much larger effect. So all of a sudden, you don't need to produce a massive amount of energy. You just got to tickle the vacuum just right. And it's really kind of the impetus of much of the research that's being done in energy and you know, production as well for extracting energy from the vacuum. You're not trying to like, so it's literally like the rockets and gravity control. It's like, you know, force versus power, you know, or power versus force, right? And basically you're basically trying to just
Whoops. Somebody has muted Nassim. There's two Nassims on here and the wrong one got muted.
I got unmuted. Sorry, somebody is trying to shut me down.
Well, there's another Nassim on here, and if we could mute the other one, because whoever that is, it's making some noise and it keeps pulling the video over to that. So that was an interruption, Nassim. Go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, so basically, if we think of these fluctuations that are occurring in the vacuum, I was going to give the example. Like think of a stadium or an auditorium, a good acoustic auditorium with thousands of tuning forks in it, right? And let's say 600 of these tuning forks are I've been giving a lot of interviews, and that's why my voice is a little rough. I'm sorry about that. But if it's not COVID-19, and you won't be affected. You don't have to put your mask on. So basically, if you are at the front of the stadium on stage with, and like there's all these tuning forks in the stadium, and you have let's say a C sharp, and 532 forks in the stadium are C sharps, and you go up front and you hit it, right? All of the C sharp forks in the auditorium, if there's good, acoustics in there, are gonna start ringing. And it's called sympathetic resonance. And so basically, you're just doing a small energy event here, but you're getting a collective energy event that's much larger, right, in the field. So what would be that small energy event, and what did science, what is unified physics and unified science telling you that small energy event should be? Well, the key there is that it should have something to do with rotation, angular momentum. You're trying to make a little vortex in the structure of space, in the ether of the structure of space. And if you get that vortex just right, it can produce a lot of energy, but as well, it can produce, singularity, or it can produce a point of very, very high level of energy density that would be easily curving space-time enough to produce a gravitational effect that would be tremendous, like that you could lift a very large ship with, that you could control a very large ship with. And you could control the velocity of that vortex and the position of that vortex by controlling the angular momentum. And for instance, if you have two vortices and you're controlling the angular momentum of these two vortices, or a double torus, and you change the velocity of the lower vortex and increase the velocity of the other, you're going to displace the center of these vortices above or below, or wherever you want. And basically you can control where the gravitational well is, and you can displace it so that you literally are falling or accelerating towards that well, that cavity you've created in space-time.
And you should note that there's no restriction on the speed that you can do that. So if you use space to move instead of moving through space, you can do that at any arbitrary speed really conceivable.
Right. Including, opening wormholes, because you see, that's a good point, William. And as well, meaning there's two things. One is if you do this, then that means that all the points in the ship, let's assume you have a ship, right? Because if you're traveling through space and you don't have a ship, you might run out of air. But let's assume you have a ship. Well, all the points in the ship are being accelerated at the same time, right? So that means that if you change the orientation of the acceleration, all the points are going to change at the same time as well. And the result is that, you know, what William was, you know, mentioning, and what it made me think of is the result is that you're going to have an acceleration of all the points in the ship at the same time in the same direction. So you will not feel G-forces, meaning you won't have this problem of being splattered on the back of the ship because the ship is being accelerated, but not you, right? So then you end up, you know, squashed and you know, at these accelerations of, you know, that would be, you know, very, very high if you're falling towards a singularity at the front of the ship. You know, if you change direction, you'd probably die instantaneously if you didn't have an acceleration of all the points, you know, in coordination. But in this case, all the occupants, everything in the ship and the ship itself is changing direction at the same acceleration rate. So this makes it so you don't feel anything. You've just done a 90-degree angled turn at, you know, 1,000 miles per second, and you didn't feel anything, right? So that's one thing. And then as well, you know, there's this problem in wormholes, traversable wormholes. So wormholes are a result of Einstein field equations, and they were mapped out in more details. They were formalized in more details with the help, with a lot of the help of John Wheeler later on. But early Einstein wrote, and this is something people don't realize. Einstein wrote this paper on wormholes, which is a consequence of his theory of general relativity, with Rosen. And so it's called Einstein-Rosen Bridges, where he showed that there could be, you know, a tunnel that could form in space-time that links two different places in the world or in the universe almost instantaneously. But when he first formulated it, he formulated it in relationship of, he used it to describe subatomic particles. So he was describing protons as little wormholes. And people don't realize that. So when, you know, I came up with a black hole proton, people were like, oh my God, that's crazy and all this. Well, you know, Einstein in the 40s was making wormholes protons, which is, you know, almost the same. It's the same equation. But basically, this idea then is that, but when it was calculated the wormhole mouth would be the Planck length. So it's very, very small, so you can't traverse them. And it would take massive amount of energy again to open those wormholes, you know, so that the mouth, so that it could be traversable. And one thing that was not quite understood, and still not quite understood, is that actually, if you spin the structure of space, the mouth of these Planck wormholes that connects all the particles can open because of centrifugal force, if you spin it fast enough. And these and now you have the possibility of being able to open wormholes, which probably wouldn't be the first thing you do after you've got gravity control, but it's certainly something that could be done in the future eventually, the first thing you do is go around the solar system and, and explore that.
See the
And
highlights.
yeah, and maybe you start trying to open wormholes later on, right? But
Probably good to know how to get back before you open one.
right. Well, when you're going around the solar system, you might meet people that figured out how to open wormholes already.
Yeah.
And they might help you on that part a little bit as well.
Well, before we get to that point, we were saying how this time we're in right now is in need of some big changes and some big solutions to the problems we have, and certainly what we're talking about here is foundational to that through energy generation and gravity control. How might that look more in the near term on the planet to make such a change?
Well, as far as energy control, as far as energy production goes, there's been a lot of technology that was developed, as early as, the Morays and then the Tesla and many others. And, the idea that we can extract energy from the structure of space, from the structure of the quantum space, from the ether, is not new. And a lot of people have worked on it, and many labs all around the world are working on it, inventors, and some have succeeded. So I think it's up and coming. I know people say, well, you've been saying that for a while. It has been up and coming. Some evidence is now emerging. For instance, NASA just announced a few days ago that they have incorporated in some of their space travel plans and development a thing that's called the Emdrive, which for almost 20 years was called the impossible drive by all the physicists. It was discovered by a physicist in England. It's basically a simple copper can that's a cone, right? A little bit of a vortex shape conic can that's plugged on both ends, and in which you're just bouncing microwaves in, and that produce a little bit of a differential, a different density between the front of the can and the back of the can, and it produces acceleration, it produces thrust. And that was called impossible because it appeared to violate the laws of motion, meaning in the laws of motion, you have to have action to produce a reaction. You have to have something blowing out the back of the can to make it go forward. In this case, nothing is blowing out anywhere. Like, it's just a bunch of electromagnetic fields bouncing inside the can, and you just have an electromagnetic gradient in there. And so nobody believed it was real. It took the inventor something like 20 years to get it tested by an independent lab. Finally, the Chinese tested it and got positive results. So then NASA, Sonny White at NASA tested it and reported conclusive positive result years ago, almost 5 years ago or so on. He got so many tomatoes thrown at him. It was horrible. And so, they tried to find all kinds of reason why the experiment was failed, and that the measurement was incorrect or erroneous measurement. So he redid it very, very carefully, and he changed many parameters to see if he could get the effect to go away. He got the same result every time, and actually the results got better. And he eventually wrote some documents, papers, saying, and you can find this on the net, saying that the thing must be pushing against the Planck plasma, must be pushing against the vacuum fluctuation. And this, so it doesn't violate the laws of motions in that sense. And basically, NASA has now incorporated that design, that kind of thrust, in some of their space developments. So it's not like, uh-oh, are you still there?
Yeah. You're breaking up a little bit. Uh-oh. Did
Actual
we
dropout.
lose Nassim just now?
It's like it.
Yeah. Did he? I'm looking at my list. He's still present on the.
I'm
There it
sorry,
is.
I lost you all. Are you
Yeah.
all, can you hear me now?
We can now. Yes, we did lose you for a minute, but you're back.
Okay, sorry. I was I was saying that, like, yeah, so this kind of technology is already being implemented, and it's really, I mean, I'm just giving a mainstream example of technology that's starting to use the quantum vacuum fluctuations. There's many other examples, but they're not necessarily public or in the mainstream. And and this, and I was talking about this in an interview yesterday on a podcast, and I was saying, the situation that the world finds itself in today is useful for many different things. But one of the thing that's useful is that people are seeing as well the amount of censoring that goes on in our world, and how difficult it is to, bring information into our world that may be counter to the narrative that that's used by the status quo. And when you talk about that in terms of doing research on energy and all this in the world, people say, well, I don't know. People tend not to really believe you're being censored, or it's hard for you to get information out, or, people are disappearing, or, things like that. And, I think that what's going on in the world right now is helping people realize, no, that this stuff is really happening. Censoring really happens in science, in various very serious science. Currently on the planet, you have virologists, people with Nobel Prize winners, with Nobel Prize laureates that are being censored because the narrative, that is being propagated is contrary to what these people are trying to educate the people with. And they're doing very good science. Their opinion is just as valuable. And some of them have more credits to their name than the people in charge, and certainly than the people that are running the media. But somehow, the media in some of these cases believe they have the knowledge, the whole thing knowledge, and are able and should be able to censor this type of stuff. So I'm just saying, and it's not like a chip on my shoulder. I mean, although it's been really difficult, there is a lot out there to overcome if you come up with this kind of technology. So this is why we have this wonderful community that you're part of, that you're, the people that are listening here. And, we have an opportunity to make a big difference by, all understanding these principles and allowing these principles to come into their world and helping propagate the information so people know that this is possible.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's what's critical right now, that because we know that this information, the science, is true. It's accurate. It's proving more so every day. And then the implications of that knowledge and the applications of it really truly can and will transform our experience in this world. And it will eliminate major technological industries that are causing problems through pollution and toxic byproduct and all that. And that's why it's so important to really look at the implications of this science, the unified physics model, the applications of it, and to really take a stand for it now to come into the world, which, as you're saying, Nassim, is currently still challenging with censorship, and yet is also rapidly, accelerating in terms of the awareness about this. And that's why we do what we do here. And
Right.
we are so grateful for the, tens of thousands of people that are coming into this program. Everybody gets to make up their own minds. We're not dictating a dogma. We're saying, look, this is what Nassim and William and many researchers, including, many around the world, in their own research, are coming to the same realization, and the vital importance of that knowledge coming into the world and the application of it is really critical to our future right now. And that's why we're doing what we're doing here, and Nassim is doing in his lab, and working towards developing these kinds of solutions. I saw recently, Nassim, that Sonny White seemed to have a new project underway. I think is what I saw. I actually didn't read the article, so I can't really say exactly what it was, but I saw a headline come through that there was some funding coming in for the continued development of that Emdrive. And
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what I was mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It clearly shows that his measurements were correct, and that the Emdrive truly produced thrust. I don't know if people realize how significant that is. For instance, the fact that we can now have a device that produces thrust literally without having to expel anything. It's all contained. No pollutants. The microwaves are contained inside the can. And so and so it's like just there's a can, and if you tie it to something, it'll produce thrust. And it's and it doesn't take that much energy to make it produce thrust. So it's fairly efficient. I think we're gonna develop it to a whole other level when it's better understood exactly why this is happening. And when you look at the way the microwave fluctuations are occurring inside the can, you can see that like you're creating a density gradient, right? That is the result of rotation at different radiuses, because it's a cone, in the system. And the result is that you get, directional thrust. And when we understand that better, we can make it a lot more efficient and a lot more accessible, meaning like something very small could produce a very large amount of thrust with very little energy.
So Nassim, the implications of this are discussed in this section here about civilization's graduation from type 0 to type 1 or more. and if you could just touch on that for a moment, what is the implication of really, this is a big shift. It's not an incremental step. And we're
Right.
talking about really a graduation from a certain level of development to going to some level that's quite radically different ultimately. You want to just
Right.
describe that real quick?
So there's always been this thought that civilization, I mean, it was developed by certain physicists in the 60s and 70s, that, civilization, they would be like different types of civilization, and we were like type 0, like kind of retarded, like not very evolved. And then there would be more advanced types of civilizations, and it would be like incremental changes, like with civilization that we use solar winds and basically like electromagnetic sails, or sails to capture the solar wind and traverse the solar system and maybe a little part of the galaxy using, solar or stellar pressure. This would be a very slow way of going around, and all this. And then there was more advanced eventually with the civilization that would capture the energy of a star and use it to travel. And the thing is that whole approach was really based on the technology that we can conceive of today, right? That's meaning that these different types of civilization were generated by concepts and by people that have limitations in their understanding of what technology could be, because clearly if those limitations wouldn't be there, we wouldn't have fairly limited technology, right? You guys are following me? So this whole idea of different types of civilization is erroneous in some ways, because it's clearly based from a type 0 civilization. Try to imagine, a type 4 civilization, which is probably going to be way different than what they thought. And what I believe is more likely is that just like our civilization, rapidly transformed when we discovered that moving magnets over a coil produce, electric fields, and we started electrifying the whole planet, or when we discovered that, a pair of engines on a wing could make something fly, and we started flying all over the place. I think that our civilization is gonna jump. It's not gonna start sailing the universe with, under, solar winds pressure. If we have to get to that, it will be too late. We're not gonna make it. It's just we're gonna have overpopulation problems. Where it's just not gonna happen. It's not gonna get that goofy. It's either we're gonna, just as we learn to control electromagnetic fields, we're gonna learn to control gravitational field and learn to live in the universe, learn to live in our solar system, relieve the surface of our planet from a lot of ecological pressure and so on, and regain a set equilibrium with the world, with the natural world, or we're not going to make it. It's one or the other. It's not. So we're either going to jump from, and it's correct, we're going to, by doing this, we are going to harness the power of a star, but it's not a star as they thought of, a star like your local star or something. It's actually that the power of stars is in the vacuum everywhere. And we're just going to learn to harness this power that's at the source of the energy of a star.
Mhm. Nice. That's great. That really clarifies what the distinction is and the progression that you are developing and working towards.
Mhm.
And let's continue on in this module. I'm just going to share this screen to the next section here, which is about the ARK crystal. Speaking of tapping the star energy from directly from the quantum vacuum. The ARK crystal is a technology that you have developed over a few decades, which became available in 2017 as a necklace. I don't happen to have mine on right now. I'm sure you'd have yours, but that's discussed quite in depth in this module as one of the initial applications of development. And it covers here the nature of quartz, the ARK crystal anatomy, the harmonic flux resonator, which is another technology in development, and then the studies with plant growth and water, the human studies, and experiments and applications. So let's go into the ARK crystal a bit, and maybe give everybody a little overview of what that is and what its benefits are.
Yeah, I mean, William and Andrea are perfect.
Hi,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to jump in.
There you go.
Yes.
Go for it, Andrea.
So just by way of introduction again, Andrea Melone is, I don't know your official title, Andrea, but you're working with Director of
ARK Crystals.
ARK Crystals, yes, of the ARK Crystal development. And
we call her our Archangel.
Yeah, indeed.
So she's the official Archangel.
Well, Andrea has been working with Nassim for many years and is very knowledgeable about the ARK crystal. So thanks for being here with us.
So thank you, Marshall, and thank you, Nassim and William and Penny, David, everyone, Angelina. So first I saw a couple of people ask, what is the ARK crystal? And in a nutshell, space is full of energy and it's just waiting to be tickled in the right way. And so the ARK crystals we just learned. And so the ARK crystals precision engineered to specifically interact with the structure of the vacuum and tickle it in just that right way and convert that energy into something beneficial to our well-being through its effect on the water. So in curating and working with William to put together the updated ARK crystal material for this section, I've had a ton of favorite parts of this project. It's been my quarantine child. First of all, just simply being in awe of how much we've expanded and progressed from the first version, which was, I believe, less than 5 years ago. And I've had a great time reminding the team of how much we've accomplished in such a little amount of time. Because as you can imagine, you know, just being on these calls and all the information flooding in, the small team, and Nassim, you know, writing papers and coming here and directing the guys in the lab, we sometimes forget to take a look back at how much we've done because we're just like blasting forward. So that's been great. And most importantly, it's reminded me of the incredible mystery that water is, and understanding it further, that, you know, we and brilliant minds around the world have been doing. We're going beyond just scratching the surface of our understanding of this great mystery and how that can help us learn more about ourselves. So just as the Unified Science course offers that view of, you know, what's happening in the field, what are the dynamics of how the structure of the vacuum works, it also offers, as we know, what's happening in here and how this is part of that creation, and how attunement to the structure of the vacuum through our habits, belief systems, what we put in our body affects the feed forward into the system. And so from my perspective, the exploration of water runs parallel to this. And so the more we understand and respect the power of water on the outside and harness that understanding into optimizing its potential, then the more we can understand and respect how it can be utilized inside. And as we know, We are bioelectromagnetic beings. It's a circuit of highways just running through us. And so increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of this flow of information through the optimized water, as seen in our EIS report, which is briefed here on the poster I have outside, a tool such as the ARK crystal can help establish that system coherence. So when we have all these systems and bodies and cells running in that balance and harmony, we achieve a more coherent state.
Very good.
Thank you, Nassim.
Very good. Very good. Nice. You know, I saw somebody on the thread there just asking if we should clean our crystals with sonic jewelry device. I just wanted to quickly just say, you know, please don't. It's not gonna be good for the crystal, not a good idea. And you know, if you just use running water, what I do is I have an old toothbrush and running water, and I just brush it lightly, you know, every few days or every few weeks, and my crystal stays nice and clean, and I have no problem that way.
I will second that. I think the crystal deserves a little love since it's giving you so much love. So frequent running it under the water, maybe once every week or 2 weeks with the brush. If you happen to have a crystal that hasn't had that TLC, if you want to use very briefly, soak it in a jewelry cleaning solution and then use a microfiber cloth if it's an extreme case, because some of these have been through, you know, a lot. So it might need a little extra love. We do have a blog on the ARK Crystal site that goes into that as well. So if you want to check that out. But yeah, thank you, Nassim.
Yeah. And William, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the testing you've done? And, you know,
Nassim, I think it'd be good to just, for those who are new, to just quickly describe what an ARK crystal is, because we didn't say that yet.
Yes. Okay, so ARK crystal is a technology I developed in 1999 or 2000 or so, and it's a little tetrahedron crystal that is cut under very specific dimensioning, like very specific fundamental resonance frequency that is scaled up from the Planck field, and as well is cut with a very specific molecular orientation in mind. So the molecular orientation is indicated on your ARK crystal by a little arrow up here that tells you where the optical axe of the crystal is. And we've altered the molecular structure of the crystal by using a technology I called the harmonic, earlier I called the harmonic sphere flux resonator. And so now we just call it the resonator. And this technology is a technology that spin electromagnetic fields at high velocity. Remember, all it is about is making a little vortex in the structure of space. I call it the smoothie approach to the universe. And so I've made a little smoothie in space, and that smoothie is able to make, to alter the structures of different minerals, including crystals, in such a way that they become little emitter themselves, meaning they produce a little bit of a vortex themselves. They make it's like making fractal vortex out of the big vortex. And so, and then we, you know, from 99, I started to measure the effects on biology from these little vortices. And I noticed that it had an impact on water. I noticed that if I used that water, it had an impact on plants. I noticed if I put the crystal near plants, the plants would grow like crazy and make more fruits and all this. And I noticed that cut plants in water that had been treated with the crystal would last much longer than the controls. At the lab right now, we have tomatoes. William, we have tomatoes that have been, they're still plumb, they're still red. Their skin is a little wrinkled, but how long have they been sitting there with the crystals?
We are at 197 days.
I can share my screen. Can I do that?
Oh, yeah.
Go
You
ahead.
want to do that?
Surely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be a good example for people.
97 days, these tomatoes. Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So
imagine-
that's 52% of a whole year. That's over 6 months.
All right. So
those,
you can see the controls over there in the bowl that are all shrunk, right? And you can see that the ones in the bowl up front are in, proximity of the crystals, and they've been grown with the water that was treated by the crystals. Is that correct?
yes. We sprouted the seeds with tetrahelix treated water, essentially running water over the ARK crystals in the helical configuration.
Mhm.
And so you can kind of see the label Tetra PGQ. So that's one that was watered with that, as well as the one on the left in the bowl. Now for the shelf life experiment, we only had the one on the left in proximity to the cuboctahedron configuration of the ARK crystals. So that's the
Right.
difference between those two. But those two groups, both during their germination and growth, received tetrahelix ARK treated water.
ARK treated water. And the other one over there, the fourth batch, was with the crystal that was not charged, right? Is that
That's
correct?
Mhm.
So we have a control which didn't have any contact with any, structured water from the crystals, but we have as well a control in which we put a tetrahedron crystal there, but that hadn't been treated by our resonator device, just to see, if we were, this is part of doing, the study. So basically you can see the difference. I don't think, William, we need to do statistical analysis, for this one.
I think the result is significant, statistically speaking.
Yeah, it's statistically significant, I think.
Very significant.
What I find interesting about the one that was not treated, so it wasn't a PGQ electromagnetically modulated one, is that there's still power in just the way you had designed its molecular growth.
Right.
So, that it shows that power, whereas those
Right.
other controls not treated with anything they're not
Right.
even tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly. The dimension, very good, Andrea. The dimensions are, very, very important. They're non-trivial. Like one of the reasons it took me so long to put them on the market is that I would not compromise on the accuracy of the dimensioning of the crystals. And so I could produce them one by one very slowly and have that level of accuracy, but I couldn't produce it in mass until almost 2 years ago, when we finally got one of the crystal industry company to tool up to be able to do this and produce. At first, they could only make a 200 or less, 100 a month. And now they're able to make more like 500 a month. But and we found another company that can make them as well. And so companies are starting to tool up to make this kind of crystals with the accuracy that's required. So the accuracy is important. The way the accuracy of the cut relative to the molecular structure growth of the crystal, the orientation of the two is important. It has to be very accurately oriented. And so the specs are very, very high for this crystal. And so even before we basically what we do is we amplify the effect that is there naturally. And the tomato example is a good example of what you see there, right?
So the ARK crystals are creating a coherent flow of energy information, which is a convertible one and the same again.
Right.
So it's how the relationship with the underlying Planck field, the quantum vacuum from which everything is emerging,
Right.
is either in coherence or not in coherence. And there are lots of dynamics in nature that will create coherence or incoherence. It's not that necessarily one is good and one is bad. When it comes to our health and well-being in our own bodies, we can see, as exhibited by these tomatoes that have been from 192 days, quite well preserved, that there's a high level of coherence in terms of the sustainability of that organization of information that they're made of. And that's what these crystals are doing. That's what they're designed to do.
Yeah, let's just say that for aging and for health and all this, you know, coherence is better than decoherence.
Mhm.
You know, at least while you're alive, you know. After that, decoherence may happen, but that's okay. You know, hopefully your consciousness is being coherent, recohering somewhere else. But you know, while you're alive, coherence is a good thing. And I want to say that the change that happens in water can be described as well as the memory of water. And when I talk about memory of water, I think, Andrea, did we include Luc Montagnier's work in?
Absolutely, twice.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you know, there's great documentary about Luc Montagnier's experiments with water and memory of water. Luc Montagnier is a Nobel Prize winner from France that discovered that water can retain memory of DNA. You know, and in the documentary, he demonstrates the effect straight up, and which is measured by a third-party lab. You know, he literally is able to transfer the DNA information from one vial to another, you know, just by electromagnetic interaction, and then send the water, which now has no DNA in it at all. You know, there's actually no molecule. Is that correct, William?
Yeah. So the receiver solution has no DNA template, but they add in the nucleosides A, C, G, T, and the polymerase enzyme. Now, if you were to have that all in the mix, it wouldn't do anything because it requires a template to polymerize a strand. But there's no template in
So
the receiver.
it should all just fall to the bottom of the test tube and do nothing, right?
And do nothing, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But then what happens?
Well, so he can take this frequency, this EM frequency that he detects from the nanostructured water, the imprint of the water memory in the actual physical molecules. It has a EM signature. He can take that frequency, send it into a receiver vial with all the right molecules, all the right biomolecules to make DNA, except for the template strand. That frequency causes the water molecules to structure and reproduce that imprint, that memory imprint, via the information coming from the EM signal. Now, the nucleotides can recognize that water nanostructure as a template and polymerize the correct DNA sequence And this has very strong scientific backing, because even in situ in your cell, you have the DNA strand and it's in a double helix, and you've got a polymerase enzyme that's going to make a new strand using that as a template, but it's bound in a double helix. So your enzyme comes and sees the backbone. It can't see any of the nucleotides inside. How does it know where to bind and what to replicate? It knows because it reads the water.
It reads the water.
The water forms a specific imprint along the backbone of the DNA. The enzyme comes, reads that, and says, "Oh, this is ACTGGC. This is where I need to replicate." Opens up the strand, replicates it, and that enzyme never actually touches those nucleotides. It reads the water imprint of those nucleotides.
Right.
So if you have that water structure, you don't necessarily need the DNA, and that's what Luc Montagnier has shown.
Right, which is remarkable. Of course, large amount of tomatoes were thrown at him.
Unripe kind.
Yeah, that's why we do our experiments on tomatoes. We have an excess, so we might as well use them for something. Even with the Nobel Prize, you can get lots of tomatoes, but the experiment was reproduced over and over again. It's very robust, and that documentary we have in there is really good. So in any case, water is something vastly more critical to the emergence of life. Oh, of course, I mean, all life emerged from water. You would think it's got a critical role to play. The problem is that in modern biophysics and molecular biology, water has been thought to be just a neutral background, that you can generally ignore. We pay a lot of attention on all the other components we find in the water, but we kind of ignore the water. Like, we pay a lot of attention to the brain, right, which is only a small portion, right, only like some 10% of what's in your noggin, which is mostly water, right? And so basically, and then there's many examples, some more recently, of people that get in car accident. They need to get an MRI of their head, and the doctors come to them and say, "Oh, well, I have good news and bad news." Good news is you're fine. Bad news is your brain is not there, right? So some people are born, or because of meningitis or certain, viruses, are, lose most of the gray matter they have up there in their noggin. And, there's mostly only water left there, and they function absolutely normally. They're not deficient in any way. And so, this tells you how critical water is in transferring information, and how actually the water is the fundamental element that holds the information and the coherency that makes life possible. That's why life emerged from water. And not just like in ancient time, like in some goo on the planet, but you came out of a placenta full of water, highly structured water. And, this, and as you age, you basically dehydrate. We know that, at 60, you've lost something like 50% of the hydration you had when you were a teenager or something. And so basically, you're establishing a highly structured, like highly energetic field for water, electromagnetic field for water to emerge from, or to structure from, is a very useful thing to do. And as you see with these tomatoes, and many like tomatoes are just a simple example we use. We've done hundreds, thousands. William, how many experiments we've done?
It's well over 1,000, because experimentation is with plant testing has been ongoing since 2012,
Mhm.
and we've never taken a break from it.
Yeah, I remember when I met you, William, when you were much younger in the old days. Yes, you know, it was. I remember when you know, you started working with us, and I went to you with one of those crystals, which at the time were not on the market. There was only a few, and I said, "Okay, William, I want you to test these." And you asked me, "What do you want me to do with them?" And I said, "I want you to grow plants with it, and see what you get relative to controls." And you looked at me like I had lost my mind. And you probably wondered, like, what did I get into getting this job with this guy? And what happened next, William?
Well, you know, I thought I was going to be, you know, in trouble starting off because I couldn't imagine that we were going to see any difference
Right.
between the test group and the control.
Yeah, that's what you told me. You said, "I doubt we're going to see anything, but I'll do it."
Now, with the first measurements that I took, this was with lima beans, and I had about 100 in each test group, and we were measuring the root growth length. The first measurement that I took, there was 100% greater root growth length in the lima beans with the ARK crystal the first week. The second week, it was up to 2 or 3 times longer roots. I was thinking to myself, this can't be possible.
Yeah.
Because I at that time, I had no understanding how that could be happening. You know, but then we planted those test groups, and I was giving we had a negative control and a positive control. I was giving the positive control Miracle Grow plant fertilizer. The ARK test group grew twice as big as the positive control group. From that point on, you know, I didn't really believe what I was seeing, but from that point on,
You knew there was some effects.
I was accepting of that there is a possibility something's going on here.
Right.
But then every test I performed after that, there would always be a difference. And so a couple hundred tests later, I was convinced there's something going on here with
Right.
the crystals.
Couple hundred.
know.
Well, because you know, I was just always thinking, well, you know, variation happens in experimentation. You know, maybe it was just a serendipitous fluke that these plants and seeds with the ARK crystal had 2-3 times the growth rate. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And each time you see it, and eventually I was convinced we're seeing something here. You know,
Right.
it's not a statistical fluke. It's not an anomaly. It's not an environmental difference. You know, it's the variable in the experiment is the ARK crystal.
Right. And William, my understanding is that there are human clinical trials as well.
Yes.
Years, I guess. Do you want to just talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. So in 2019, we completed a blind placebo-controlled human clinical trial. It was actually 2 tests that were done. The first was on strength, balance, flexibility, and endurance. One group wearing the ARK crystal on a pendant and charging water overnight and drinking it. A second group wearing a placebo control, which is essentially it's a glass tetrahedra that looks nearly indistinguishable from the quartz, although it has none of the special properties of the ARK because it's amorphous glass. But the human eye can't see the difference unaided. So these were compared to baseline. So, you know, what did these 2 groups look like in their strength, balance, flexibility, and endurance parameters at the beginning of the testing, a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later? how did they progress? We saw significant results in the ARK test group over the placebo and over baseline. So significant improvements. So increases in strength, balance, flexibility, and endurance. Then there was a second study performed, and this was testing cognitive functioning. So, the ability to retain memory, respond to a questionnaire, problem solving. It also tested hydration levels using bioimpedance. So that measures the hydration levels, intracellular hydration levels, as well as the utilization of that water by the cell. So it's also kind of indirectly a metabolic measurement. Heart rate variability testing, and in all of those test parameters, we had significant increases with the ARK crystal test group over the control, over the placebo control, and over the baseline. I should mention that we did see a placebo effect. So people who received that cool looking pendant with the glass placebo in the titanium structure probably thought they had the real deal. And so they had a slight increase in the functioning. But the important thing is that the ARK test group had statistically significant increases over even the placebo controlled. So certainly there is some feedback going on, so where the mind is creating an improvement from the piece, but there's also, as shown via the placebo-controlled setup, a real physical effect coming from the ARK crystal itself. Right now, it's been interrupted by the quarantine situation, but we're working with another independent laboratory that's in our area. They do just fantastic work, and we've been measuring again using this time a double-blind placebo-controlled study with human participants. We've been looking at sports recovery, essentially. So after acute exercise, we can measure the onset of muscle soreness or delayed onset muscle soreness, that's DOMS, which is an inflammatory response. And so using thermography, we can see differences in the inflammatory response. Now that got interrupted by the whole situation. You couldn't have participants coming into an office and getting up close and personal with researchers, so that was put on pause. But in addition, we'll be measuring arthritis, which again is an inflammatory response. But it's something, again, we can measure using thermography. So we're going to look at if there's differences in the inflammatory response of arthritis in our ARK versus our placebo-controlled group. And excitingly, we're working with Dr. Lydia, who is a member of the Resonance Academy. She's been on some of our Q&A faculty calls. If you'll be joining us moving forward, you'll see more of her. She works a lot with the bioenergetics of archaeology, going to megalithic sites, temples, ancient temples, and studying the bioenergetics and also the geoenergetics of the sites. But we're working with her. We're going to have, again, testing at through the university, University of Ioannina. I'm not saying it correctly, in Greece. We'll be doing studies with cells. Human cell culture, animal cell culture, with the ARK crystals. And in this way, we can look at the biochemical changes that are occurring. We can see changes in gene expression, changes in telomere length and vitality of the cells. We can look at, we can study stem cells, see their the rejuvenation applications with the ARK crystal technology. So that's another thing that's in the works, but kind of paused by the global pandemic situation.
Yeah. You mean
William?
the pandemic?
The pandemic.
Indeed.
Um,
William, have any of the studies been published, the prior studies?
Well, not in a journal as of yet. We have been preparing the reports, the studies for publication in a peer-reviewed journal. We have provided some of these reports. I believe the human clinical trial that was performed last year is available. Andrea, I know that in the latest module 6, you provided a link to that report. Is that correct? Or definitely a synopsis of it, correct?
There's a synopsis for both the human pilot study and the EIS report, as well as the downloadable to the whole file. So I've been answering a little bit in the chat, but everyone, if you dive into the module, everything we're talking about is there.
Yep.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Thanks to your help, Andrea.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the last section.
Yeah, we have 136 questions.
Yeah. You want to go to questions? I was going to go to the last.
I don't know.
I was going to have you describe the last section of this, which is about biology and awareness.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to talk about. Very good.
Good, and we may not get to questions. We'll see if we get to questions. There are too many to answer, but
yeah, we'll try to get some.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get some. Here's the topics of the final section called Biology and Awareness. The unified physics of biology and awareness, cellular and molecular information processes, the cellular membrane, etc. So then ubiquitous presence of awareness. This is really getting into some of the fundamental relationships of the unified physics model, the nature of the Planck field as an information structure, the idea of the space memory network, which then ties into what we were talking about with the biological systems and water, and how the water is the medium of information memory and exchange, and all of that. You can start to see a whole picture coming from integrating now this aspect of it into the model. So why don't you describe that for a little bit, and I'm sure William will have some comments as well.
So basically, the concept is that you have a certain amount of, interaction that are occurring at the biological level that are not, isolated to that level, meaning that scale is not isolated from the atomic scale. Like as each cell is made of 100 trillion atoms, and these atoms are organized in very specific minerals and different sets of like water, hydrogen, oxygen, and all this stuff is present, and it's highly coordinated. It's not just randomly bumping into each other and happening, to make life. There's about 100 trillion. How many trillions or billions of chemical change happens in a second, William?
In a single cell, 36 billion chemical changes a second.
In one cell.
In one cell.
Yeah. So, when people say, William, the thing is that when people think of biology, they always think about these slow moving things, like amoeba kind of looking things that are going really slow, and they're not thinking about high energy physics, right?
Or precision technology.
Right.
I mean, these, in a certain sense, are nanomachine. The organism, is a complex nanomachine system. And at that molecular atomic scale, things happen very fast, like very fast, and at very high energies. I mean, the electric field inside a cell is 1,000,000 volts per square meter. That's tremendous. I
Right.
mean, the amount of energy that's there is not what we see, at the macroscopic scale, our scale.
Sure.
You'd have to get it down to that molecular level to see, around the mitochondria with the ATP synthase molecule. I mean, it's reaching, extremely high temperatures with all the energy thermodynamics occurring.
Right.
y-
And the mitochondria is spinning at like thousands of RPM, right?
Around 8,000 RPM.
8,000 RPM as
Yeah.
it's making ATP molecules.
And it's literally like a rotor. And they attached a fluorescent molecule onto one of the arms of it so that they could count the revolutions per minute. And it's like, that thing is spinning almost as fast as a jet engine turbine.
Right, like a bat out of hell. And
Yeah.
how many of those is there in a cell?
So an average number is 1,000 mitochondria in a cell. So I mean, you're talking an energy powerhouse,
Right.
and the number of those spinning generators, EM generators, is 1,000 per 1,000. So it's like it adds up. So hundreds of thousands of those in a single cell.
Yeah, wow. And then, when, like in a normal day when you do nothing, you don't spend any like energy, which is a dangerous thing to do during quarantine. It's like yesterday I went surfing and I was like, I couldn't catch my breath just getting on the other side of the break. I was like on the other side. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so out of shape. Anyway, so I needed to do more spinning mitochondria right there, man. I needed some more. I almost drowned. And so basically, in a day, just doing nothing, you recycle, you make the same as your body weight in mitochondria. Is that correct?
Yeah.
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 And then if you run a marathon, how much do you produce?
Well, so say, you're sitting around on the couch during quarantine. That's as much as 60 to 80 kilograms, maybe depending on your body mass. Say you're running a marathon, it's like a ton of ATP.
Right.
Is recycled.
A ton of ATP you're going to make during that marathon. So I just wanted to talk about this with you because people have a tendency to think of the body as being like this sluggish, amoeba kind of thing, and the cells are being like sluggish and all this. I just want to clarify that this thing we call the body is like this amazing energy device that's like very, very highly tuned, and that is doing like incredible miracles every second, and that this level of organization is probably emerging from a lower, from a smaller scale of the atomic structure, which is about 100 trillion atoms per cell, and that are interacting, that informing the field, and that makes this higher level of information, and organization occur at the cellular level. So in our paper we wrote together, William, we talked about how basically when a system gets like with 100 trillion cell or 30 trillion cell, depending on how you're counting, it becomes complex enough, and there's so much information transfer coming from the quantum field that the system can become self-aware. And yeah, go ahead.
And that's also a part of that intrinsic function of the space memory field of the information feedback feed forward process, which we actually use to describe how you can get those complex nanomachines forming, from that deeper level, then bringing that organization into trillions of cells, hundreds of trillions of cells. When you have that amount of information, input, processing, feedback, and feed forward, that's self-awareness. That's consciousness.
Right. And so basically, and we describe the field as a space memory because space time is, I was, and I'm sure Einstein is okay with it. I just had to, recoin his coin, because time is only true if there's memory. That is, if the system doesn't have an evolutionary line, if it doesn't have an arrow of time, meaning if it doesn't know what happened before, it doesn't have a way to evolve to what happens after, and so on. So you need memory in the system. And so I was saying that, like, basically everything you do, everything that happens in the structure of space is recorded by the space. A little bit like Montagnier's vials of water records the information of DNA. Just like that, when anything happens in the structure of space, you actually are interacting, you're leaving imprints, information on the structure of space. And memory, what you call memory, your memories of your childhood and all these things, you're actually accessing the information on the structure of space. It's not something that's in your brain. And now, if your antenna, if your body, if your brain, is like impeded by, different chemicals or metals and stuff like that, then your antenna might lose its capacity to tune in to sets of information, and you might have Alzheimer, or things may happen. But it's not because the information is in the brain, it's because the body, the whole body, your biocrystal antenna is accessing the information in the space. So, and the space is connected through this wormhole network. And so every time you're changing the space and accessing the space, the whole network is being informed. So you're interacting with the universe. And this is what we finish on, because, like, you might not get the space drive tomorrow, and you might not get the over unity device to run your house and your car and everything tomorrow. It's coming, but it's not tomorrow. But what you can do is that you can become the vacuum engineer yourself and vacuum engineer your body into coherency, into a high level of coherency, so that you can, make various transformation happen both in your body and your consciousness, so that you're, and at this time in history, being strong and healthy and having a good immune system and all this is really important. And basically you can do that, certainly with, like, all kinds of things you can find in nature that can help you do that. But as well, you can do that because we know for sure that your state of consciousness, your state of emotion, has a huge impact on how robust your biology is. So now we should take some questions. We have 147 now. We need to do these things for like a few hours. Like,
yeah. Well, let's see. There's very far ranging. I was just going.
I was thinking maybe we can put together all of the questions and then perhaps a bonus call, we could put you on a 3-minute timer, like speed dating with Nassim. Try to get, this way in a 2-hour, maybe live with Nassim call. It would ding at 1 minute left, and then we'd get you.
Oh my God, that's good. You guys gonna like bring on the heat. My answers are always like forever. Okay, that will be good training for me. That's a good idea. We could do that. Let's do it.
Here in
All
the
right,
chat,
let's
like it.
do one right now.
Okay.
So there's a number of questions I'm noticing in regards to the relationship between electromagnetic fields that we're surrounded in, both naturally and also, of course, in our technologies, especially in our modern age, and our biological systems. And I think now, given what we just discussed, even our consciousness and how, the information flow is impacted, and how the biological systems are impacted, and are there ways in which we can to both protect ourselves, but ultimately to make these electromagnetic frequencies more compatible for us. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. So basically, first of all, we are bathing in a soup of electromagnetic fluctuation at the Planck scale that we have determined is the source of reality. It's the source of all the material world and everything, and most likely your consciousness. And it's really resilient, meaning because it's high energy. So it has high energy. So it takes quite a bit of energy to mess with it. And in fact, you can expire a person very quickly, like by exposing it to radiation or something. But what I mean is that the fundamental, components, constituent of that person are very resilient. Like protons don't slow down, they don't just disappear, they don't decohere, no proton has ever been seen to decay, and so on. So this Planck field has high energy, high level of coherence, and clearly it as it scales, it has the capacity, it has low entropy in getting the information into larger and larger scales, right? And it scales to us very nicely, the information. However, we are experiencing certain levels of natural occurring electromagnetic fluctuation in our environment that this organized system, this highly coherent system, has, organized itself to be able to live in this and be comfortable in this and not be affected too much by it, and so on. And at the same time, in modern history, we have invented electromagnetic devices, emitters, and receivers, but the important part is the emitters, in this case, this being the receiver, but emitter towers that are producing certain amount of what you could call electromagnetic pollution in our environment. Now, that electromagnetic pollution has started a long time ago with radar and, radio and, TV at the time, and all this stuff that was going around. Eventually, we all got routers in our houses, and we got a little more radiation then, electromagnetic radiation. We all got cell phones and all this stuff, which produced like a localized, electromagnetic fluctuation near your body, and so on. And so basically we have created a kind of noisy environment. I was saying that the other day in an interview, like if you could hear all the electromagnetic pollution that's going on right now around you, it would be kind of deafening, right? It would be like this deafening noise in your ears that would be like constantly going 24/7. Your body has to deal with this. It's constantly experiencing this. You know, anecdotally, people say, well, you know, sometimes I try to turn my router off at night when I go to sleep and I sleep better and stuff like that. Yeah, you know, there's some reality to that. You know, I mean, think of it. If you put yourself in a microwave oven and turn it on, you're not going to feel good, right? It's just not going to feel that great, you know, and mostly because the microwave frequency doesn't go through water very well, so it bounces off the water and makes it heat up. You know, you can imagine that other frequency have different effects on the biology, which is very much an electromagnetic structure. So, but it's very resilient. Actually, when you know, if you're not a person that goes around measuring these things, you don't realize how much noise there is. But when you go around and you measure, you know, with the like, even with simple devices like tri-film meters or whatever around your house and, you know, near your fridge and all around and near the cables and near the plugs and all the noise from the 60 hertz and all this stuff, you realize, wow, the body is dealing with a lot and it's capable of dealing with it. It's remarkable that it doesn't come apart, you know. It's amazing. But there's definitely levels of energy that are going to make it more and more challenging for the body to be able to maintain coherency. So the important part is that you can't necessarily stop these level of radiation to occur, right? Because there's an impetus towards more information in our world. And hopefully we're going to the place where, as we discover this fundamental field and we learn to use it, we'll be able to transfer information node to node through the wormholes, you know, the natural wormholes of creation, without having to go in between. So we won't have you know, waves, permeating our space, because we will be literally quantum jumping the information across nodes. And if you think that's far in the future, you know, it's not. It's already been done. We transferred bits of information from a satellite to the surface of our planet a few months ago, I think a year and a half ago, and so on. So we're using quantum entanglement. So we're very, very close. But meanwhile, until we get that, you know, it's important that you do everything you can to keep your coherency strong, right? You can't stop it. You can't stop from bathing in this, but you can keep the water structure in your body highly structured and very coherent. Hey, this was more than 3 minutes. Nobody stopped me. Oh my God.
We're just seeing how you.
I need a timer, literally. I need one of those things you cook with, you know, that goes.
That would have been about 6 minutes ago.
Sorry, I
No,
forgot.
it's all good.
It's okay.
It's good.
So it's really important it's really important, especially at this time, that you do this and keep your body in a high state, you know, of energy. And that has to do with the water molecule and its coherency. You know, and certainly the ARK crystal is showing some evidence that it can help with that. But as well, certainly, you know, where you're at in your mind and in your feelings, and how what is your joy in life, and all these things are really important to maintain that high level. What you eat, of course, you know, every day, like how well do you hydrate, and all this is very important.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I'm gonna get better at that myself.
Yeah, well,
I'm working on it.
takes a bit to unpack some of these these bigger questions, and
Mhm.
I just wanted to ask in regards to exactly what you're talking about, and now we're having this whole 5G infrastructure being put in place, not only on the planet but in thousands, tens of thousands of satellites around the planet, which to me feels, it seems to be a transitional technology that really is going to become obsolete pretty fast with the kinds of things
Hopefully.
we're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully, but it's such a massive imposition being put into the world.
Right.
Do you feel like that is a
For the
detrimental
sake of
action?
faster internet. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's only one side of the
Yeah.
equation.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think they'd spend billions and billions of dollars just to make our movies download faster.
Right. Right. Right.
But that, what's your perspective on that in regards to these kinds of issues we're talking about, and also this fact that it's going to become obsolete pretty
Yeah.
fast?
Well, let's just hope that it becomes obsolete fast enough. Let's
Mhm.
just, let's
So
just
you
put it
feel
in
it's very
that context.
detrimental.
Well, I'm sorry.
You feel it's a very detrimental.
Yeah, well, of course, it has a detrimental effect on biology. It's clear. I mean, there's some evidence that's emerging now, but it's not just 5G, 4G and all this before as well. It's just that,
Mhm.
the energy levels are keep going up, and eventually, of course, it has very
Mhm.
significant, where maybe it was slight before, eventually it becomes very significant health impact. Never mind putting satellites all around the planet, you know, um, you know, interacting with the surface across the ionosphere. And there's a lot of things we could talk about there, that have to do with destabilizing, the ionosphere, the electromagnetic fluctuation in the, in the structure of our ozone layer and so on. And, is very complex and we don't understand it very well. And we tend to play with it in, let's just say, unsafe ways. I mean, including during at the end of the Second World War, when they detonated, nuclear devices in the high, ionosphere, and basically irradiated, massive amount of the ionosphere, with electromagnetic fluctuation, in some case, destroyed areas that were hundreds of miles, thousands of miles from where they detonated the device. And that really surprised them in some ways. And so it really is important that our evolution really goes to the next level, because the approach we're taking right now is not necessarily going to produce the result of a thriving, self-sustaining organization, society. It could very quickly have such a negative effect that our civilization could have significant challenges to survive. And so, we are really, really needing to go to the next level, of this transition from a lower set of technology to a higher set of technology very quickly. And that can only be done if the population, demands that it occurs.
Right.
Meaning, if the population says, okay, this, enough, please stop, messing with biological structures in laboratory to make bioweapons. Please, reduce the amount of electromagnetic pollution, or at least keep it at a level that is acceptable, and do appropriate science before releasing, whether it is, electromagnetic devices or medication into the public at large, in the form of vaccination or other, like appropriate, biological systems, and the environment, it holds on a very, very sensitive balance. And we've been upsetting that balance significantly. We're very, very close to push it over the edge. And I think it's really important at this point that, that appropriate legislation and appropriate social structures are put in place so that corporations cannot all of a sudden decide, you could say unilaterally, right, for all humanity, that it's gonna launch, thousands of satellites, or place, electromagnetic emission device at high energy level everywhere on the planet, right? Like, the population should be able to see appropriate data, appropriate clear understanding, appropriate studies, very advanced, non-biased scientific committees should be able to examine all these things, and and be able to take decisions that are for the benefit of humanity, not of special interests and corporations.
Absolutely, Nassim. I couldn't agree more. And we're really at a time now when that's just more critical than ever.
So we need everyone.
We need everybody to really get that this is a very, very serious challenge we're facing, and there's a lot being kind of thrown upon us in these ways that we don't have a say in yet. We actually do have a say in it if we really are willing to stand up and claim that. And that's what's, I think, really happening and accelerating a lot in the world right now. And then
in a constructive and productive way, not in a violent way or anything, but it's not necessary. We are the people, and we are able to decide our fate.
And the flip side of this process is that it's one to analyze and question what is being put into the world now. And then there's also all the alternatives, which are what we're talking about here in everything we just shared about the implications and applications of unified physics and unified science. There is so much available that will make those technologies that are causing these problems and creating the imbalances no longer needed. And it's all already here and available.
And that will shift, and that will shift the power as well to the population.
Exactly.
Right?
Decentralizing.
Decentralized.
The way all these systems are set up. And that's the critical shift we need to make. And the beautiful and good news is that we know the science behind it. That's been known for a long time, not just but goes back to Tesla, goes back to ancient cultures, as we saw last week. And that we really know how to implement and bring into application the science and the nature of the field, and restore the balance and bring that harmony into all of our systems. And that really should be the highest mandate. And that's what we're a stand for. And That's what we feel, you know, everybody in the world really, it's time to stand for that.
Right.
And that's a constructive response, while also saying, hey, wait a minute, let's stop this other thing here, because
Right.
we, you know, without enough data, with no testing, with no verification of the safety across all these things you mentioned, obviously,
Right.
you know, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, and you know, and the cherry on the sundae is that the world we can build is remarkable. We have all the information, we have all the talent, we have all the technology to like transform our world into this like amazing utopic world where we have, you know, almost infinite amount of energy available to us. We can travel in our solar system. We can harvest minerals from the asteroid belt. You know, I mean, we can unify. We can unify the world. We can unify science. We can unify our interests. I mean, how simple is this? Is to unify our interests. Unify our interests, and our interest is survival. It's thriving. It's, you know, it's being healthy. It's being able to have a future for our children. It's being able to have a future for our families. Those are all the interests of everybody on earth. So let's put them together. Let's unify them and make our earth the representation of those interests instead of the representation of special interests for a few. You know, and yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
Really beautifully said. Thank you for that. And I think we'll wrap it with that thought, because that's as big a thought as we could come to with this conversation about the implications and applications of the unified physics. And we're at the 2-hour mark now as it is. And sorry, everybody, we didn't get to more than one question today. Well, we got to a couple, I think, but you can see how rich this topic is, and the implications and applications of this are where it all comes together. And as we were just saying, this is what makes possible that beautiful world that we can see and we all know is in our hearts and in our minds is totally possible. And all we have to do is choose it and act on it.
Right. Yeah. And be dynamic. And so you know, this is the last call of this series, I'm going to continue to make more calls that are open, and as well for the members. So we're going to shift, but I'm going to be with you. You know, we're all together in this, you know, and I'm, you know, I want to say that like your participation in this is so critical, is so important, and it makes such a difference. And so, you know, become a member, talk to your friends and family. We're setting up an incentive program, so that, you know, affiliate type of program, so that if you bring some people in, you get some goodies. You know, just getting people to take the course. We just want the course. We want the information to be available for people, and we want people to know it's there. So if you can help make that happen, it makes a huge difference. And you know, we're going to publish these talks as well. We're going to have new ones, in different circumstances. Maybe on the forum, we're going to have question and answer moments and so on. So stay with us, stay tuned. We're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to see you, you know, and so, and I love you all. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing, for being here with us, for like supporting us, for making this happen. You are all amazing miracles, you know, and you are all geniuses. Like, that's the other thing people need to know. You are all geniuses. Like, the fact that your life is genius already, like, you're amazing. Just remember that you're amazing. And don't forget that everybody else is amazing too. So like, all together, we're amazing. And I can't wait to be with you again. So until then, May the vacuum be with you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Nassim.
Thank you, Nassim.
for leading the charge in this area of our needed evolutionary path here all
Thank
these
you.
years. And thanks to Andrea and William and Jamie and Penny and David and the other Nassim that's on the line here. Thank you guys so much. Thank you everybody for participating in this 6-week series. And you know, if you want to continue with these live Q&As with Nassim once a month and with the faculty once a month, just become a member. It's $5 a month is the minimal price that it takes to do that. So we'd love to have you join us there, and we'll be doing some more of these public events down the road as well. But thanks for being with us here today. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for hosting,
you.
Marshall.
My good pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. You guys are awesome.
Yes. Be awesome. Be amazing.
Be your amazing self.